Today I'm joined by Harley Stephens. Harley is the owner of Holeshot PR, which is one of the leading motorcycle and automotive communications and social media agencies in the UK. So welcome, Harley.
Thank you, Simon.
Harley, I always like to start off with just finding out a little bit more about your business. So tell us a little bit more about Holeshot PR and what you do.
Well, I think your description's probably as we try and project ourselves outwardly on the website and on LinkedIn, etc. But in reality, it's a group of people who are motorcycle enthusiasts who've found a way of working in the bike industry and also a little bit of car work and another outsider sector. But some of it's PR, a lot of it's social media, and it's increasingly video content as well. But the bit that joins it together is the two and four wheeled excitement and passion, I guess.
And and look, you were telling me before we joined here. I mean, you sort of cover some of the bigger events and the big companies. Perhaps share some examples of some of the things, something you're working on at the moment, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So we've just had the World Superbike Championships, which came to Donington Park. So we were there with Pirelli, helping guests and getting content for Pirelli Moto, like the motorcycle division. And then yesterday we stayed there and we had 100 Pirelli tyre dealers and their top customers enjoying themselves quite literally in the wheel tracks of the World Superbike people the day before. So we went there with Honda, that's our partner, for that particular event, and they brought over their top Isle of Man TT riders. I introduced them and did a little bit of presenting myself. Not that that's my forte. And then we captured as much content as possible for everyone who was there and various different partners. So it was quite a relaxed event in some respect because it wasn't a live circuit event in terms of loads of racing and qualifying. So we had like a really good spread of time with them.
Okay, look, thank you for sharing that. And one of the other things I'm always intrigued to find out from business owners, Harley, is why they started out in business. What made them set up a business? So I think I'm right in saying that you set up your business about 15 years or so ago. What made you decide to go into business for yourself?
I guess like a lot of people, whether they're working as a hairdresser or if they're in finance all the way through the spectrum, I was working in a PR agency and picked up lots of valuable skills and contacts, but did not enjoy working in a office environment and thought this is my opportunity to go and work for myself and see if I can, start from the bottom and and try and replicate some of that. And also for personal reasons, starting a family and all of the reasons why people don't want to work. Ironically, what's become work from home, I guess, in more recent times. But when I originally did it, it was for more personal reasons, and I guess you would say as a lifestyle business. And then as times moved along, I've ended up with my own business and those sort of challenges that you get as you grow in scale.
Absolutely, that's it. And actually, on that note, what would you say the biggest challenge is that you face being a business owner, or since you've been a business owner?
People, I guess, working with people, whether that's clients, staff, freelancers, and trying to work out what other people want from you and picking up that experience. That, and probably the moment when I went from being a one-man band and making the step to employ other people, because up until that point it literally was all on you. So if you decided to have a few hours off to do something, that was generally when the next unpredictable piece of workload would always hit you. So only when you had like a right-hand man or woman, that was probably that was the first few years was definitely the most difficult until you could make that next step in my experience.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I often, um, and this is my belief. I think one of the worst places to be in is to be that solopreneur,
Mm.
um, because you've created yourself a job, but you have to do everything. You have to do the sounds, the marketing, the finance, the operations, whatever industry you're in, and you're trying to juggle all of these sort of balls, and actually when you move to that next step of actually employing people and then saying, right, okay, you can do the sales and marketing, you can do the finance, or you can do the operations. You've got to then learn other skills. You've got to learn people management and leadership. But actually, it changes, it adapts. So you've got those different things to look at. So how did you? Did you find it easy to make that step from it just being your business to recruiting somebody, or was it a difficult sort of decision to make?
It was a decision I wanted to make, but you've obviously it's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? You've got to have the business there unless you've got very good levels of funding behind you. So we needed to make sure we had enough business in place to take on those first bits of help. And as time's gone on, I guess we've scaled up accordingly. The people who've ended up working with us are generally people who we already knew, and in some guys worked within one of the marketing for motorcycle sectors. So that's definitely made it easier, as in people you have some commonality with, I guess.
Okay, and did you find it sort of natural for you stepping to, right, that you were responsible for doing everything, to being that manager and that leader for other people as well? Was that something you naturally did, or was it something that you felt as though you had to adapt and change to?
To be honest, I found it quite a weight lifted, and then you felt like instead of instead of being nervous or worried if you had to do something with your kids or go on holiday or whatever it was, that you couldn't leave your laptop or phone for an hour, you suddenly realize that somebody else who's just as competent at, at the skills and the workload, probably more so, is actually monitoring and looking after your business when you're away. So personally, I didn't. I found it all positive, really. Yes.
Brilliant, great. I love to hear that. And because sometimes people can find it difficult to make that next step. So it's great to hear from somebody that found that actually a bit of a relief, if you like, that actually, yeah, this is a weight lifted, as you put it. Um, and if you could wave a magic wand and solve one challenge in your business right now, what would it be, Harley?
What would it be? I guess really it would be having the resources, as in all the people that we need to be able to cover every weekend for all of our clients. But that might not financially make sense, to be honest. So that's an ongoing challenge. So if we go to a British Superbike event, which is where we go every other weekend, and if all of our clients all want something done that particular weekend, as can happen, then we have a resource issue, if I'm honest. So that would probably be it, and maybe finding some more people who could grow with the business and learn particularly the video editing skills. I'm sure there are other things, but I can't. I'm sure. I'm sure there's other frustrations like all of us. Having more time, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, time's the challenge. Well, there's some interesting things there. So I often, yeah, I often find that these generally fall, people's challenges generally fall into one of three areas: time, team, or money. It could be, it may not, it normally falls under one of those three headings. And
Mm.
interesting enough, it was interesting to hear that you mentioned two of those, time and team.
Yes.
And actually, I suppose you mentioned a third in a way is that you mentioned that actually it may not be financially viable to have a big enough team that covers everything. So actually, in a way, you sort of mentioned all three of those. Okay,
Yes.
so what would what would you say your biggest learning has been since you've been in business, Harley?
I guess it's again to do with people and being able to delegate onward to people who've got the relevant skills, really. And that's, I'm not trying to sound smart there. It's just that we were a PR, and I guess in tandem with that, adapting really, because we started off as a pure PR company, as in written materials and dealing with journalists.
Mm.
But as we all know, that world has changed very quickly. So I think we were lucky enough to have people who had social media and video and content skills as our business changed very, very quickly, in that our clients have asked for more of the latter and less of the former. If that answered
No,
your
it does
question.
because
Yeah.
I think what I picked up from that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Harley, is the word that springs to mind is adaptability.
Mm.
Is actually, one of the biggest learnings is to be able to adapt to the changing environment, adapt to what your customers want and need. That was adaptability came up. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's our particular sector has changed massively, whether you're a massive PR agency, which is almost a household name in London, or if you're more niche or bespoke like ourselves, it's changed so quickly. You only need to look at the media landscape to see if we'd continued doing what we were doing to start with, we probably wouldn't have much of a business left, to be honest.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. The way things have changed and the speed that they've changed as well. And actually, Harley, so on that note, how important would you say it is these days for businesses to have sort of great communications, great PR, great social media? How important would you say that is?
I think I think the biggest question is what who is your, I guess this is really obvious, but who is your audience? And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean who's looking at what you're trying to communicate, but who do you want to talk to?
Mm.
So we have some clients who are purely B2B,
Mhm.
where having social media is not really benefiting them for some of the time that they put into it, in the same way as, say, Pirelli, who have many, many products and across loads of quite exciting avenues for their end users. I think the biggest thing, as you said first, is communication, and whether that's within your own business to your own staff or your partners. The most important thing that we've all got to try and remember is you've got to pick the phone up. We've got all of these tools and we've got so much technology and there's so many ways of keeping in contact with each other. But picking the phone up, or like we just did today, going and seeing a client and spending a few hours understanding their needs and wants, that's probably that that skill's never changed, and that needs to continue. Once we purely rely on WhatsApp messages, then then all sort of communication really breaks down, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And thank you for sharing that. And it's and I like that response as well that you said, that actually, you are heavily involved in PR and communications and social media, but actually highlighting that we mustn't forget to pick up the phone or go and see people. And it's amazing the amount of businesses that I speak to, and you sort of talking to them, and they'll say, "Oh, well, we sent the person an email and they didn't come back to us. Well, have you phoned them?" Well, no. Pick up the phone. So actually, some of those things like actually picking up the phone, going to meet people, seeing people face to face. We've got to do those as well as the other things like social media and things like that as well. They've all got their place, haven't they?
Yeah, they have, and I guess a company equally, they still need to go, and no matter how strong their social media is, they've still got to go and see their customers, whether that's live events or mixing at a smaller hospitality event or whatever it is. If we're only relying on people scrolling through their phones, we're losing that human contact and interactivity. So we're lucky that we see our clients and they see their customers at all of these motorcycle events, for example. But if you relied on one trade show a year, it's much more difficult, of course.
Yes, no, absolutely, yeah. And this, like, and by the way, I think that's a great share, and I appreciate you sort of highlighting that as well. And look, there's one question that I always like to ask everyone that is kind enough to join me on these discussions. And Harley, this is the question: what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you? So if you could go back and speak to yourself when you were 18, what would you say to yourself?
I guess without sounding too trite, you've got to you've got to make some mistakes, and I don't think an 18-year-old you, that's anybody, unless they're very lucky, knows what it is they're going to do when they're 30. And I, like most people, did many different jobs until I found the thing that I wanted to do. And so I don't think you can beat yourself up too much on the way through, because there's a bit of trial and error before you get to that sort of hallowed ground of the right sort of industry, what you want to do, and obviously earning, some sort of decent money within it. And my own children, one of them is making her first decisions and already worrying about what job that's going to lead to. But I think we all know you can't really decide 3 steps along before you do each of your examinations and go to university, etc., what that's going to be. So it's really easy to say, but you can't stress over it too much, albeit great to go and get skills, of course.
Again, great share. I like that. I mean, hold my hands up. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was 18. And Hartley, I'm interested because obviously you're in a sector that you're very, very sort of passionate about, in terms of motorcycles and automotive. Did you have that passion before you went into that industry? And is that what led you to go into it? Or is that a passion that you've developed since you've been in that industry?
Well, you might have noticed I've got quite an unusual first name.
Yeah.
So it is no coincidence. No, I've got parents who had motorcycle shops and a business at Brands Hatch, and we live near Brands Hatch. And I started riding at 18 months old. So I guess quite early on, it was probably always going to be something to do with two wheels. So that's my sport, and that's what I've always done. And so I'm lucky enough to have a business that's involved with it. So it's always continued. Yeah.
So I like that you've identified, you knew what your passion was, and then you've sort of gone, well, okay, how can I monetize this passion that I've got? How can I make money out of something that I love and enjoy doing? And that enables you, as you said now, to go to superbike events every other weekend, which you enjoy and love. So I think that's a great thing to be able to do, and actually, for the younger generation to do. Think about what you enjoy, what you love, and then think about, like, how
Yeah,
can
no, I think you're right, Simon. Actually, rewinding, I guess that whole maneuvering about what you want to do, if it's not something that you've got an interest in, then the next 30, 40, 50 years could be a bit of a slog. So if you're into horses or motorcycling, it's probably safest to try and get something that you do have an interest and a passion in, of course. Unless maybe you're the head of an investment bank, whereas there's other reasons to be there.
possibly so, yeah. Well, look, Harley, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon. It's quite it's a little bit like a couch session where you have a bit of a think about why you're here in the first place, of course. So I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good, thanks.